Good morning, Pathophys. Third part of Chapter 9 lecture. Obviously, with the announcement by the governor, we will be meeting this way for the remainder of the year. I'm very disappointed about that. I know that there are so many other things that go along with that emotionally for you guys, and tangibly, things that you're missing out on. I want to do my best to help you and make sure that the goal that we stated at the beginning of the school year, or at least the beginning of the class, beginning of the semester, was prepare you guys for the next level, to make you better at critical analysis, independent thinking, diagnosing diseases, because that's what that's all about. So over the next 2.5 weeks or so, and beginning of next week, I'll put out a long-term plan with everything that we're going to do. I'll lay out the rest of the year, beginning of next week for you. Just make sure that I give you as much as I can. I'm not trying to overwhelm you. I'm not going to just load you up with projects or assignments, and I'm definitely not going to overload you with notes. But Chapter 9, we have to finish this up, and I'll probably have one more short lecture early next week and reference this chapter and go over some disorders specifically. So what I want you to do is make sure that you look over the notes when you're trying to answer the questions. Everything that I'm going to ask you is going to be in those notes, and I'm going to cover as much as I can quickly in these short lectures. I can't download or upload a 2-hour-long lecture and go over every single last note that are in the notes right now. I'm going to leave that up to you. As I told you, this is an independent class, and I want you to be able to decipher what you can. I do want to go over some of the main points with you, though, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So, Chapter 9, we talked about synapses last time, nerve impulse transmission, neurotransmitters. Today we're going to move to another topic called the blood-brain barrier. Now, this is a physical structure. This is a system of capillaries and a system of glia cells that literally forms a protective layer around the brain. And it's not like the meninges. The meninges is more of a, like a helmet, so to speak. It's kind of a literal protected layer. This is to keep things out of the brain. This is to not allow certain chemicals, try to avoid certain bacteria, and other pathogens from entering the brain, even though that can happen, unfortunately. But the blood-brain barrier has evolved to do that, to protect you. Again, it's a system of capillaries, it's a system of glia cells that collectively protect the brain from invasion and from poisoning and other types of substances entering the brain tissue, the neural tissue. Now, with that said, we'll go into a disease, and I said we were going to do diseases next time, but I want to talk about Parkinson's. Parkinson's is something that you will deal with as a healthcare professional. You may know somebody in your family that suffers from this disease. I don't know the rate of occurrence, but it's a fairly common disorder. And what happens in Parkinson's is that we have a lack of connection between the dendrites, the neurons in the brain. And that is due to the fact of a deficiency of a neurotransmitter, exactly what we talked about last time with neurotransmitters, their ability to allow dendrites and neurons to make connections, especially in places like the brain. That neurotransmitter is called dopamine. Now, researchers have known for years that a lack of dopamine in the patient's brain is what causes the symptoms and signs associated with Parkinson's. So, simply, why not treat with dopamine? It's a chemical, give dopamine injections. And the problem with that is it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. It cannot do that. So it's produced in the brain, it's produced by the neurons in the brain, but we can't deliver it externally. So what they did, scientists came up with, was a derivative of dopamine called L-DOPA, which has the ability to cross the BBB and does allow us to treat people with Parkinson's. And that should beg another question. Well, why do we see people with Parkinson's if we know to treat it? Because we don't know to treat it effectively. Scientists, doctors, physicians can treat it to some extent, but just like anything else in the body, the limits of a person, the homeostatic balance of a person are going to change from day to day. They're going to be different from person to person based on aging, based on what you had for dinner the day before, based on your physical condition, whether maybe your body's fighting off another type of infection. So just to have a pill that has L-DOPA in it or an injection and just take it doesn't work that way. Parkinson's patients learn how to manage their disorder. They learn to administer the medications that they need when they need them. to some extent. There are a lot of different modes of delivery. I've read about people that have pumps that are internal, where the pump is contained in their thoracic cavity. They can literally push on it. It has a shunt that goes to the brain, delivers the L-DOPA that way. There are people that take pills. Michael J. Fox is a famous actor from my generation. Is pretty much a spokesperson for this disorder right now. He's made great strides in helping educate people about this disease and how it affects people. So Parkinson's is something that you definitely need to understand. And if I were you, I would dig into it a little bit further. I'm sure that I'll put some type of question about that on the end of chapter assessment. All right, next topic. You can see the line in the notes. The brain itself. This is something that we cover during junior year. We go through all the parts of the brain, but I'm going to go through them with you real quickly, again, just as a refresher in a couple of minutes. In the notes, there are much more detailed explanations of each of these regions. So again, if there's something that you feel deficient on, something that you feel that when I'm saying the things in the next couple of minutes, not triggering a response in your own brain, make sure that you take a peek at these. So the brainstem. The brainstem is obviously the inferior region of the brain. It's the extension of the spinal cord, the extension of the brain, whatever way you want to put it. People argue about that all the time. It is typically considered to be a portion of the brain. It's an expanded region of the spinal cord, the superior region of the spinal cord, or an inferior region of the brain. And what does it do? Life support mechanisms, breathing, heart rate, swallowing, involuntary function, muscular contraction, involuntary muscular contractions. It also helps to maintain blood vessel diameter constriction and dilation, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but that allows you to maintain the proper blood pressure, which is obviously important for a lot of the other body mechanisms that we've discussed. So the brainstem is a pretty important piece. It has three basic regions. It has the midbrain, medulla oblongata on the pons. The diencephalon, which is in the central region of the brain, is considered another primitive region of the brain, just like the brainstem is. When I say primitive, I mean in stages of evolution. When you look at organisms, you see the development of the brainstem, the diencephalon, cerebellum, cerebrum. The diencephalon has two parts, the hypothalamus and the thalamus. Their jobs, again, regulatory, sensation, processing of sensations, and fear, arousal, those type of things, all in the mechanisms or all within the structural aspects of the diencephalon. So basically, one thing about the diencephalon I want to bring up real quickly, because a lot of you have asked me about, even before we left, about being able to do mental illnesses for your projects. The thalamus is an interesting region of the brain because it processes a lot of your sensory stimuli outside of the sense of smell. And so basically everything that you see, everything you taste and hear is going to go through this region of the brain. It's kind of a relay center. So say, for instance, you're sitting at your desk in the classroom and somebody opens the door and it's not a person, it's a bear, and it's growling at you. That sensation is going to go through the thalamus. The thalamus's job is not to make a judgment about that so much, but it is to send that information quickly as a relay center up to your cerebrum. Your cerebrum then allows you to integrate and process that you're in a dangerous situation. So this is a very important region of the brain because it kind of takes everything in and then it sends it to the places where it needs to go in the brain so you can make judgments and decisions about what you've just seen or heard, tasted. So those are things, obviously an important region of the brain if you want to study that one. All right. Next region is the cerebellum. The cerebellum is at the base of the brain. It's the backside behind the occipital bone. Its job is simple but super important. It maintains posture and balance. It is about proportionality in your body. It keeps track of what your body is doing. And when I say that, I mean that genuinely. There are receptors, sensory receptors embedded in your muscles and your tendons, and when your muscles contract and when they relax, they send impulses to the cerebellum and to the brain, and it basically tells your brain where your right leg is, where your left leg is, what your right hand and what your left hand are doing. You don't think about it. It's not something that you spend any time considering, but if your cerebellum is damaged, if it gets hit, if you have a tumor in your cerebellum, you'll notice right away because you're going to be extremely dizzy. You're going to have a hard time with coordination because that's what this part of the brain does. So it basically is a feedback center where it's communicating with the body and telling the body proportionality. You know, where is everything? You know, my feet underneath me, or am I sitting, am I standing, that kind of stuff. All right, and then the last region of the brain, which we could spend days talking about if we wanted to, is the cerebrum. This is the center of memory, cognition, learning, speech, motor control. This is what makes human beings humans, and we aren't the only organisms that have cerebrums, but ours is the most highly developed. The cerebral cortex is on the outside, it's white matter, and again, its job, all those higher learning functions, memory, speech, all those things controlled within the cerebrum. So these are 4 basic parts of the brain. So we look at the disorders during the next lecture, and as you look at the notes, try to correlate anything that's involved with a brain disorder or something that causes dysfunction in the brain to these 4 regions. Have a good day.